Tokemune am segula bui bui kala boi Tokemune am segula boi bui bui kala boi Shalom. Ateret bala gambarina udskaula tokemune amsegula boi b'shalom boi b'shalom ateret bala gambarina udskaula Tokemune amsegula boi b'shalom boi Tokemune amsegula boi kala Tokemune amsegula boi kala. Welcome to Hebrew Perspectives. I am so glad that you are here to welcome the Sabbath. Welcome to Hebrew Perspectives, where we bring the Hebrew perspective on a regular basis. Thank you for all of you that are joining us here today. I'm glad to be with you today. For those of you that are new, I've noticed that there's a lot of new folks joining in. It's wonderful to see so many new folks coming around. What we do is in the description of the YouTube video. And also what we do is in the weekly readings posted at the beginning of each and every week on Sunday. And so what we do at Hebrew Perspectives, we bring you the Hebrew perspective. Why? Because we're reading a Hebrew book full of Hebrew heroes. We follow a Hebrew Messiah. And we follow a God that speaks Hebrew. So it only makes sense that we do a lot of Hebrew things. Amen. Glory, hallelujah. So this week's Torah portion is Vayishlach, and he sent. Again, this is Torah study. Torah is the first 5 books of the Bible. Torah means instruction. Oftentimes you'll hear people call it the law. That's just a small part of it. The Torah is so much more. It's so alive. And if you're a follower of Yeshua HaMashiach, you're following the living Torah. So isn't that wonderful? Remember to like and share, and remember to subscribe. Help us to grow. Remember to hit that little like button, especially on YouTube. Apparently that helps the algorithms. If people are liking it, it causes other people to see it and they like it, and so on and so forth. So wonderful part to be here. So today we're going to talk about Israel shall be your name. Israel shall be your name. Before we get started, we are going to say the blessing before Torah study, as we always do each and every week. And let me get to that real quick here. All right. So, blessed are you, Lord our God, King of the universe, who has sanctified us with his commandments and has commanded us to engross ourselves in the words of Torah. Please, Lord our God, sweeten the words of Torah in our mouth and in the mouth of your people, the family of Israel. May we and our offspring and the offspring of your people, the house of Israel, all of us know your name and study your Torah for its own sake. Blessed are you, Lord, who teaches Torah to his people Israel. Blessed are you, Lord our God, King of the universe, who selected us from all the peoples and gave us his Torah. Blessed are you, Lord, giver of the Torah. And as the blessing says, may Torah study always be sweet to you. Once again, thank you for joining us. If you are new, pardon me as I drink some water. If you are new, please stick with us. And help and learn, you'll hear things that you might not hear anywhere else. And so we're glad to be a part of you, and we're hoping that you'll be a part of us. So this morning we have, I just wanted to share from Rabbi Twersky from his book, Living Each Day. It's a daily devotion that my wife and we read every morning. We've worn the binding out on the book that we read. And so this goes to show you how often you read something, you can still see things, you can still learn from things, you can still grow from those, you can still, it could still affect your life in a positive and wonderful way. So Rabbi Twersky, he starts out with this from the Shabbat morning services: "They shall rejoice in your dominion, those who keep the Shabbos and delight in it. The people that sanctify the Shabbos, they shall be satiated and take pleasure in your bounty. Many people become so absorbed in their work that they never have the opportunity to truly enjoy the fruits of their labor. Many people continue to postpone the time for enjoyment, and too often this pattern of absorption in work and postponing enjoyment is brought to an abrupt halt only by a physical disability which interdicts work. However, this also severely restricts enjoyment and brings on worry about one's health. This really speaks to our world today, which doesn't seem to take a rest for anything. It just continues to go on until it breaks down. Shabbos compels a person to interrupt the hectic pace of the work week and to enjoy what one has achieved. In addition, the compulsory restriction of activities is conducive to meditation and facilitates a closer relationship with God. Slow down and come to a stop, just as God stopped creating. If we come to a stop, all of a sudden we can hear God trying to communicate with us through all the chaos of this world. And that's oftentimes, it's funny. Somebody asked me at work, they were like, "What do you listen to on while you're at work?" I have a lot of alone time. I'm by myself all day long. And there are times where I can listen to something, but for the most part, I do not listen to anything. I find it to be somewhat of a distraction. I find a lot of things to just be noise that drowns out what, the thought process, so to speak. And I've come to the conclusion that many people, although if you listen to spiritual music, that's great. It uplifts you, gets you into the right mindset. That's wonderful. But there's so much out there that just can occupy your mind, and these people don't want to think for themselves, or just don't want to do any thinking. There's some people shouldn't be left alone with their thoughts, but it just goes to show you that there's so much going on. Well, so this brings me to the next part of what Rabbi Twersky is talking about. He says, "Cast your burden upon God and he will provide for you." Psalms 55:23. "Whereas there are many things which require our concern and planning, there is also much worrying that we do that is unnecessary." A woman once told the following story. She says, "One night I was worrying about how my son would adjust to college. What if he did not do well in his courses? Would he despair of school and quit? What if he fell in with the wrong crowd and started using drugs? How would he adjust to being away from home? Then I heard him crying, so I went in and changed his diaper." People who have a tendency to worry excessively should learn to place some of the burden of running the world onto God. If we insist on controlling everything ourselves, we are apt to find ourselves indulging in unnecessary and premature worry that is as inappropriate as the woman's concern about her infant son, how he will adjust to college. I found that story to be great, and I thought I just had to share it with all of you. So back to what we're doing here. So Vayishlach, and he sent. Now, as you know, and some of you that you may be new, if you haven't read the "What We Do Here" part, I will kind of fill you in a little bit. I won't give too many details, but we read from the same portions that Moses and King David and Ezra and Nehemiah revived, and then on into the Messiah and his disciples, people of that day. They read the same Torah portions every year, every week, every year, following the same cycle, the same pattern. Follow the pattern and the glory will fall, right? It makes sense. So, and then what we do is we add scriptures in from the Gospels that help go along with this. And it was kind of interesting. So Matthew 26 is the story of where the Messiah, he goes to pray. And this is just before he's going to be betrayed. And he goes to pray, and he takes some of his disciples with him, Peter and a couple others. And he goes to pray. He says, wait here and watch. And he goes to pray, does let the cup pass from me. Nevertheless, thy will be done. And so he comes back and he finds them sleeping. And basically he kind of chides them and says, you couldn't stay awake for just a little bit while I went and pray and keep watch. And so one of the things that he says right there is a very, very familiar passage where a lot of people talk about, and where he talks about the spirit desires, or the spirit is willing, but the flesh is weak. And this goes to and talks to us about this whole Jacob and Esau story we've been reading about. We've been following Jacob and Esau. We've been seeing how, the different types of people they are and the different directions that they go. And so you'll also notice that in the Haftorah portion, again, when things were revived later on, and actually before that, actually in the later kingdoms anyway, the book of Obadiah, you'll notice that it was added. And it's one of the Haftorah portions. Again, the kind of the history of that is that when they were taken off to Babylon, they ended up adding in portions, basically, because they were not allowed to read the Torah. They were forbidden to read the Torah, but they were allowed to read other books. So they went and they did due diligence and did their studying, and they found out things that related in parts from the prophets and from the writings and places like that, that helped to talk about and remind them of what they had studied on a regular basis while they were captive in Babylon. So, and Obadiah is one of those today. Now, Obadiah is not a lot of folks know, and again, this is one of those things I was talking about, that you may hear things here that you've never heard before. Obadiah, now he was around the 8th century before the Common Era, and he was, guess what? He was an Edomite at birth. And so his book is addressing his home country of Edom. And so he later converted to Judaism. Yes, right. Obadiah is a convert. Remember how much God loves converts. And so he also became a disciple of Elijah. And here's another thing that you may not realize this very much, or but he was also the steward of King Ahab's household. Remember Ahab and Jezebel? Yeah, stories that what was it? He took care of a couple of hundred prophets on his own dime, hiding them because Ahab and Jezebel were going around killing the prophets. Pardon me. So now one of the things that the sages will tell you is that he merited the gift of prophecy because of what he did, because he hid prophets. He ended up becoming a prophet himself. And isn't that wonderful? And so in his prophecies, as I said, they pertain to his the destruction of his native nation. Now, what you may not know, again, here I'll bring something else for you, is that what you may not know is that in much of rabbinic literature, when you look through it, you will find that whenever Esau eventually becomes Rome, there's some history to it all. And so let me see here. Let me get back. So, and when we read in our parasha, we read about the descendants of Esau and his descendants. They lived and they ruled in the region of Mount Seir, which is known as Edom. And the people of Edom, they were basically, throughout the Bible, they were continuous adversaries of the Jewish people. And they were quite the thorn in the side. So Obadiah, he speaks of the doom and the fall of Edom in the days of Mashiach, in the days of Messiah. And of course, this is not just unique to Obadiah. It's just interesting because Obadiah was an Edomite and he converted to Judaism. And so that makes it really interesting. But the Mishnah talks about the fact that the descendants of these biblical nations no longer inhabit their biblical places of origin. So, in other words, they expanded out and then they ended up somewhere else. And that's basically what happens with the descendants of Esau, is they become Rome. Rome is founded by the people and the culture of Edom, the descendants of Esau. And so the Romans who destroyed the Second Temple, and then those European nations that continued to, pardon me, they continued to, I lost my place, excuse me. Oh, they continued on the same path of basically persecuting and torturing the Jewish people. And so you'll notice, like I said, in rabbinic literature, it's often referred to as the exile of Edom. So the book of Obadiah then refers to Edom as in a broader sense. All right. So now, when we look at it and we look at the book of Obadiah and you read through it, the details of this prophecy, they seem kind of obscure. And that's the way a lot of the prophets are. Even when you go to read Ezekiel, you'll find that that's a book that's many rabbis tell their students, please be careful in studying this. Make sure that you have someone who knows the book very well to help you along with it, because it's difficult, and that's understandable. So now we have Esau and Jacob and the story of them coming. And so Esau has 400 men and he's advancing to attack Jacob. And there's I didn't look into what we talked about last year, but I'm sure we talked a little bit about angels. But Jacob dispatches angels, and I think I mentioned earlier in this early part of the week, if you're following the Hebrew Perspectives page, you saw the post about how I took several translations from modern Bibles and popular Bibles that are used today. And every single one of these where it says where he sent messengers, it all says he sent messengers. One Bible even capitalized the M in messengers. So they knew that it was something more to do than just regular messengers. But in the Hebrew, it's malachim, which is angels. So Jacob, he was able to send angels ahead of him to Esau and to send a message saying, basically, here's what's going on. We're coming to you. We're headed toward you. And then they came back and they told him, he said, Esau's heading toward you with 400 men. We understand that Jacob has had some encounters with God, and he you would think that he wouldn't have any fear or any doubt because of his encounters with God. Remember Mount Moriah and the ladder and the angels ascending and descending. And a lot of buildup today. A little lemon water to help with the throat. And so you would think, how could he doubt? Well, we're the human. Remember, we have this tendency to put people up on a pedestal, and I've said this before, and it has to. We're talking a lot about this. We talked about that with Rachel last week. We tend to put people up on a pedestal as if they could do no wrong. We do that with our spiritual leaders. We lift them up as if they could do no wrong. And then what's really bad about this is that when they actually do fail, then it's like stick a fork in them. They're done. They're so devastated. It's because they lifted them up so high. So there's a danger in doing all of that. We remember that people are human beings. They're human beings. We all struggle. We all have these things that we do that we struggle with, and a lot of people struggle with doubt. There's no doubt about that. So then we have the whole story here of, so Jacob he does his military preparations, and he takes some time to pray. And if we go to Genesis chapter 32 and verse number 10, then Jacob said, God of my father Abraham and God of my father Isaac, Hashem, who said to me, return to your land and to your relatives, I will do good with you. I have been diminished by all the kindness and by all the truth that you have done, your servant. For with my staff I crossed this Jordan, and now I have become two camps. Rescue me, please, from the hand of my brother, from the hand of Esau, for I fear him, lest he come and strike me down, mother and children. And you had said, I will surely do good with you, and I will make your offspring like the sand of the sea, which is too numerous to count. So you can see here, Jacob, he's doing like any other human being would do. Pray to God, ask for help, and remind him of his promise. Remind him of his promise. So then as we read along in the parasha, we find out that there's this whole list of tribute that Jacob sends to Esau. Now, there's something interesting about Jacob, and he's pretty wise. And he learned some things living with Laban for 22 years. Now, according to the sages, Laban was a renowned sorcerer. He was of the occult. And for Jacob to live near this man for 22 years and still have some semblance of, being a God-fearer, following God, and raising his family near that, that's quite the tribute to his character. You can basically say that Jacob took from his grandfather, he took the chesed, the loving kindness, and he took the gevurah, the strength, from his dad, Isaac, and he brought those two together, and he combined those, and he did what his grandfather and his father could not do. And living among what happened with Laban, it had to have been tough. It had to have been rough. And so, of course, again, he's afraid, and he's wanting to appease his brother, and he's sending this out, and he keeps in the message, he's your servant, your servant, your servant, your servant, 5 times, I think it is, in that first part. And he's pretty wise. He's portraying himself as being somebody humble. You know what? I'd actually say that here he's finally being himself. He's finally being himself, and I'll talk more about that. And so he finds himself. Let's go to chapter 32 and verse number 25. Jacob was left alone, and a man wrestled with him until the break of dawn. And when he perceived that he could not overcome him, he struck the socket of his hip. So Jacob's hip socket was dislocated as he wrestled with him. Then he said, let me go, for dawn has broken. And he said, I will not let you go unless you bless me. He said to him, what is your name? He replied, Jacob. He said, no longer will it be said that your name is Jacob, but Israel, for you have striven with the divine and with man and have overcome. Then Jacob inquired and he said, divulge, if you please, your name. And he said, why then do you inquire of my name? And he blessed him there. So Jacob called the name of the place Peniel, for I have seen the divine face to face, yet my life was spared. The sun rose for him, and he passed Peniel, and he was limping on his hip. Therefore the children of Israel are not to eat the displaced sinew of the hip socket to this day, because he struck Jacob's hip socket on the displaced sinew. Now, I could talk for a while about the displaced sinew and all of that, and how that relates to kashrut laws and why they do not eat that part of it. But we don't have that much time. Like, there's so much content here. We might be able to do that at another time. But so what's interesting about this is that, again, you have many commentaries, of course, on this whole struggle with the angel. And Jacob comes right out and he says, for I have seen the divine face to face. He's seen the divine face to face. And so many people, when I was reading through the commentaries, and because of Christianity, there's a lot of pushback because of basically of the incarnation and things like that. Well, and of course, a lot of people that believe in Jesus, they do not follow the commandments, and so he's seen as a person that violates Deuteronomy 13. And so you can see that, but their knee-jerk reaction to a lot of them is to explain it away as to something else. And some of it is quite interesting. I read a lot of it. Some say that it was Esau's angel that he was fighting. Some say that he was fighting himself, his own inner demons, his Yetzer Hara, his evil inclination. So there's many different ideas as to what was actually happening. But when this is one of those where it's like, do you really need to look at the deep level of what's going on here? When Jacob says, I have seen the divine face to face. Because later on when we read, he talks to God, and God, again, we go through the name change thing. It's twice. And so we understand that there's something important happening here. And when there's an emphasis on it like that in the Torah, in the scripture, we understand that it's there for a reason for us to learn and understand. So now, then, after he wrestles with the angel, boom, here we are with the encounter, Jacob with Esau. And it's almost as if, like, immediately, as soon as he was done, the sun was right, because it says in verse 33 that Jacob raised his eyes and saw, behold, here comes Esau. Esau was coming with his 400 men. And remember, Jacob had his camp all divided up. And Esau ran toward him and embraced him. We talked a lot about this last year, about the kiss. And we talked about Judas's kiss and all that. You can go back and watch last year's video if you want. It's very enlightening. Then it says in verse number 5 of 33, Esau, he raised his eyes and he saw the women and the children. He asked, who are these to you? He answered, the children whom God has graciously given your servant. So Jacob's doing something here again. He's very wise in what he's doing. He's talks all of a sudden. He's saying that I'm your servant, but here's what God has done for me. Okay, this is important. Understanding what's going on here. So everyone is parading and they're all bowing down. Rachel, and then he asks in verse number 8, and what did you intend by that whole camp that I met? He answered, to gain favor in my Lord's eyes. So again, he's doing some this kind of a flattery thing going on here, but he's also kind of showing his hand so that it makes Esau think. what's going on here, you know? So Esau says, I have plenty, my brother. Let what you have remain yours. But Jacob said, no, I beg of you, I have now found favor in your eyes, and accept tribute from me, inasmuch as I have seen your face, which is like seeing the face of a divine being, and you were appeased by me. Okay. All right. So again, here comes the flattery. All right. Your face, hey, Esau, your face is like the face of God. He was just finished wrestling with God, and now he's telling Esau, hey, you look like the face of God. No, not really. I understand we're all created in the image of God, but we change how we look by what we do. And I'll talk some more about this. Hopefully we don't run out of time. And so let's see here. So then he says, the divine being, as you were appeased by me, please accept my gift. Verse number 11, please accept my gift, which was brought to you, inasmuch as God has been gracious to me, and inasmuch as I have everything. And we touched on this a little bit before. I think I talked about it this week, and I've talked about it before in other sections, having to do that word kol, everything. Esau had plenty. Remember, Esau was a very materialistic man, and Jacob was spiritual. So Esau, I got plenty, but Jacob, he's speaking more of a spiritual sense. I have everything, and because I have everything, I'm blessed. All right. So please accept the gift which I brought to you. I have everything, and he urged him, and he accepted. Now, here's what's interesting is that at this point, let me see here. I've got a note here that says I need to look at Rabbi Monk here in the Call of the Torah real quick to see what we're talking about here. I might have. So going back to the tribute and the instructions instructions concerning that tribute, he's saying this was also talking to the future generations of Esau, the Edomites, who eventually become Rome. This concept implies, this is Rabbi Monk talking, says this concept implies that Jacob's offspring are to keep to the same kind of language which Jacob used for Esau when they have to defend themselves against aggression and persecution from Esau's descendants. There's a story of how there's a certain rabbi that during the times of just before the temple was destroyed, that he would have to go to the Roman courts, and he would have to intervene on the behalf of other rabbis or Jewish people at that time. And he would use this method that Jacob used with Esau. In other words, flattery and, being wise, as Yeshua told his disciples, be as wise as serpents and harmless as doves. Remember, we talked about that not too long ago. And so this also concerns, Rabbi Monk continues, this also concerns the three methods of defense used by Jacob: gifts, prayer, and combat. This is something, it's another one of these threefold cords. We give tzedakah, we pray on a regular basis, and we're ready for battle at any moment's notice. This is something that and I have to say that latter part of it doesn't happen a lot of times. That combat part of it doesn't come about until something happens. Kind of like what we were reading in the living each day portion this morning. Something all of a sudden happens with someone's health because they didn't take the time to follow God's commandment of following the Shabbat, letting life rule them rather than them ruling life. And so combat has fallen off to the wayside, being prepared, so to speak. Now, Rabbi Monk continues, the wealth of detail in this passage might be explained by its generality and broad applicability. Rabbi Monk uses big words. Similarly, later on, in this manner, you shall speak to Esau when you find him. Back in verse 20. All right. So you can see here, again, he's being very, very wise in what he's doing. Very, very wise. He's learned some lessons living with Laban for 22 years. He's learned quite a bit. And so we get to the part here now where verse number 12 of chapter 33, and he said, travel on and let us go. I will proceed alongside you. But he said to him, my Lord knows that the children are tender and the nursing flocks and cattle are upon me. If they will be driven hard for a single day, then the flocks will die. Let my Lord go ahead of his servant, and I will make my way at my slow pace according to the gate of the drove before me and the gate of the children until I come to my Lord in Seir. So at this point right here, Jacob's saying, hey, go on ahead without me. Go on to Seir and we'll meet you there. I did a rhyme. And so what you have is he really doesn't want to go with him at all. He doesn't want to go in that direction. That's not his intent. And Esau says, well, let me assign to you some of the people who are with me. And he said, to what purpose? Let me just have favor in my Lord's eyes. And so Esau started that day back toward Seir. Now, maybe Jacob was concerned about having some of these men around also, materialistic men. They might have had some pocket ham. You just don't want them around your children. One of those kind of things. But so then here in verse 16, it says, so Esau started back that day on his way toward Seir. But Jacob journeyed to Sukkot. Wow, that sounds familiar, doesn't it? Sukkot. And he built himself a house. And for his livestock, he made shelters. Sukkahs. He made sukkahs. He therefore called the name of the place Sukkot. So Esau journeyed toward Seir. He went, and like we said, his descendants become Rome. Now, Jacob could have followed that path, but he didn't. He went toward Sukkot. Now, here's something interesting when we look at this. So when we look at the majority of Christianity today, what you'll notice is that people believe, and they don't go much beyond that. In other words, they just go to Seir. But Jacob continued on and journeyed to Sukkot. We learned about Sukkot not too long ago, but what is Sukkot? Ultimately, what is Sukkot all about? Sukkot is all about personally feasting and celebrating with God. Isn't that wonderful? Now, many people, they're believers, and I'm trying to do this gently. We have to understand is that the majority, a lot of believers today, they never really get beyond just an initial belief in the Messiah, and the belief in God. This is why so many of them fall away. This is why, like, the Yeshua talks about where you throw you have to look for good ground. Well, then it has to take root. Well, how does it take root? Well, then you start feasting with the Lord, causes your character to change. You work on your character traits, your midot. You follow along and you learn. And so feasting and being with the Lord. So chapter 34 is an interesting, I really wish we had the time to really dig into it. It's the story of Dinah, the daughter of Leah, Dinah bat Leah. And it's interesting because it talks about you in that time, in that day and age, if people looked at Dinah, they would say Dinah, the daughter of Yaakov, Dinah, the daughter of Jacob. But right here, it says that it's Dinah, the daughter of Leah. Now, Leah, as we know, or maybe you do not know, but Leah was a person that wanted to be close to God. Remember, she did a lot of praying. She prayed that she would not marry Esau. All right. That's why she was tender-eyed. Well, accordingly, her daughter was someone who was just like her mother. It says that she went out to look over the daughters of the land. Now, Leah was a tent dweller, just like Jacob was. That meant Dinah was a person that was the tent, but she also went out to look over the daughters of the land. Now, what were the daughters of the land? They were, then of course we know the story of Shechem. So basically, according to the sages, what Dinah was doing was going out and trying to win over the young ladies in the land, bring them in under the wings of the Shekinah. This just goes to show you that there's always been, from Abraham and Sarah to Isaac and Rebekah to Jacob and Leah and Rachel, there's always been this searching and bringing other people into the covenant. It's always been a part of Judaism. It's always been there. And it wasn't until later times, because of persecution, that went away, because of the hardship, because of the persecution of it, that went away. And so we know the story. Shechem takes her and violates her, but then he wants her to be his wife. He has his father go and meet with Jacob, and Jacob's distressed. Dinah's brothers are upset. Of course, look at what happened. And then the guy's just kind of like, hey, what's been done has been done. Can I have her for a wife? This has probably incensed them a little bit more. But Jacob, in a roundabout way, so what Dinah has done is actually she did kind of start this conversion process, because now all of a sudden Jacob says, we can't be any part of you. Because Hamor says, hey, take our daughters and we'll take yours. We'll intermarry. And Jacob's like, no, we can't do that. This is another one of those things throughout history. The Jewish people have tried to stay to themselves, but people get upset by all of that. And there's a reason for that, is because of the idolatry. The idolatry creeps in. It's keeping the idolatry at bay. And so what we have going on here is, so Jacob says, you know what? If you want to be with us and mingle with us, you'll have to become circumcised. You'll have to convert. So they're all willing. But here's the thing. They're doing it for the wrong reason. A lot of people convert for the wrong reason. There are many today, they convert so they can make aliyah or go to Israel. Again, that's the wrong reason to do it. And trust me, Israel sees through those things for the most part. So then you have the unfortunate incident. So then on the third day, when they're all really sore after the circumcision, Levi and Simeon, they go and take the sword and they slay everyone. They slay all the males. And then what do? They take all the women captive, and they take all the cattle and the flocks, and they do all this. And Jacob gets upset. He says, why have you done this? He makes me look bad to the rest of the nations around us. But in hindsight, what happens is actually the rest of the nations end up fearing him because of this. It's almost kind of like, wow, that I hear they were all trying to convert, and then, and then they got slain. It might have been, it's so much speculation there. But anyway, it's kind of interesting. So Simeon and Levi, they decimate Shechem. They just decimate them. And then, they say to their father, should he treat our sister like a harlot? they got a good point, right? They've got a good point. Verse 35 or chapter 35. Now, chapter 35. So before we get into that, I'm going to share a little bit from Rabbi Sachs of blessed memory. And he talks about in verse number 32, going back, or chapter 32 and verse 29, he brings back, remember we talked about the name change twice. Today, remember we're talking here today, Israel shall be your name. And he goes to Genesis 32 and 29, your name shall no longer be Jacob, but Israel, for you have striven with beings divine and human and have prevailed. Now, according to Aryeh Kaplan, he interprets to reads like this: your name will no longer be said to be Jacob, but Israel. You have become great. That's the word sar in Hebrew. Sar is prince. You hear Sar Shalom, Prince of Peace. Before God and man, you have won. So this name change, like we're talking about, it doesn't happen just once. It happens twice. And there's some importance about this. So then again, after the episode of Dinah, we go to chapter 35, and it says that God said to Jacob, arise, go up to Bethel and dwell there and make an altar there to God who appeared to you when you fled from Esau, your brother. Where is Bethel? Remember he made an altar? Where did he do that at? That was Mount Moriah. This is the place where God speaks to people. You go to Israel, you go to the Temple Mount. It's very powerful. It's more powerful than any other place in the earth. And so he tells him to go to Bethel. And so we read in verses 9 and 10, after Jacob returned from Padan Aram, God appeared to him again and blessed him. God said to him, your name is Jacob, but you will no longer be called Jacob. Your name will be Israel. So he named him Israel. So he says it a little bit different here. Now, the thing about this is that this wasn't a name adjustment of adding a letter, like with Abraham and Sarah. It wasn't that at all. This was kind of a almost a complete name change. Well, I mean, it was. And it was a name change having to do with the character of the person. Remember, Jacob was named as a heel grabber, right? So, and then with all the others, names changing before, it happened just once, but here with Jacob, it's happening twice. So again, this is very important. This is a puzzle that we need to solve here and talk about this a little bit. So Rabbi Sachs says, having said twice that his name will no longer be Jacob, the Torah continues to call him Jacob. It's interesting. His name's changed to Israel, but the Torah continues to go along and Jacob this and Jacob that and Jacob this and Jacob that, right? And even God calls him Jacob in the Torah. It continues to go on. So why is this happening? So we even pray to the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. So the Torah tells us twice that his name is no longer going to be Jacob, but yet we continue to do that. Now, according to Radak suggests that your name will no longer be called Jacob means your name will no longer only be called Jacob. So, all right. So you could be, it's like, some people call him Jacob, some people call him Israel. There's people that are called by a couple of different names. That kind of makes sense, right? You'll have another name. So, but then Sephorno says that in the Messianic age, your name will no longer be called Jacob. So he's talking about future generations. Eventually, Israel. Remember, Israel is also a name of God. The future tense is used in the Torah, so it means the near future, not the distant one. unless it's explicitly specified. So this is another one of these mysteries that we seem to deal with about Jacob, about what his personage is like, what kind of person he was. And also it makes us think about Esau. And so when you look through the Midrash, you'll see that there's many stories, and it ends up portraying Esau as being super evil and Jacob as being super perfect, super good. And that's come to be expected. We can easily see those things, and we look at them when we really dig down into it. And we look at Esau, and we look at the time that they were living in. Looking at Esau was a person that a lot of people probably admired him. The guy was ruddy and tough. Remember, King David was also ruddy and tough, and he had to fight those urges. We talked about that. And then, of course, we talk about Jacob, and he was a tent dweller, a spiritual man. Not a lot of people want to be that meek and mild person. They admire the ruddy, tough guy, right? And that was a lot of happening during those times. You know, you had a lot of Greek figures in the later years that happened that people were drawn to. So you can say, not just so much that Esau represents the hunter, that he was the hero of many of those ancient cultures, but not in the Torah. When we read it, when we look at it, we can see that wasn't something to aspire to. That's why we see so much of the transition to the hunter-gatherer, the shepherd, that kind of person being someone, as we see in the Torah, as being someone that is good, something to follow. Because, the hunting, the violence, the killing, all of that. But Esau bad, Jacob good, right? So Esau represents the world that it was back then. Well, Jacob represents something that is more of a wonderfully and fearfully made, tentatively working into a new world, something being brought into being, a spirituality, something radically different than what the world was. It was something new and challenging. This is why throughout rabbinic literature, you'll find references to new creature, new birth, living water, all of this. Those were not new to when we read them in the Gospels. Those were not new. This is why we know that Nicodemus was just being coy and asking Yeshua, asking him, how do you become born again? What was going on here? That conversation was basically trying to see what Yeshua believed. It's another one of these things that, again, only Pharisees believe that. And so Nicodemus was pretty much trying to say, are you one of us? Are you a Pharisee as well? Do you believe like we do? Only the Pharisees believed in immersion in a mikveh. Only Pharisees believed in the resurrection. All right. So Rabbi Sachs here, he talks about he says, so he talks about what Jacob signifies. He has this desire to be someone else. And that's a lot of the problem that we have in the world today. People don't want to be themselves. And social media and television and all of this has created this where people want to be someone else. They want to be so-and-so. They're not being themselves. Israel shall be your name. This is talking about something a little bit different. And this is what the name Jacob signifies. It's the name that he acquired holding on to Esau's ankle, holding on to his heel. Rabbi Sachs says that was consistently his posture during the key events of his early life. He bought his brother's birthright. He wore his brother's clothes. At his mother's request, he took his brother's blessing. When asked by his father, "Who are you, my son?" he replied, "I am Esau, your firstborn." At no point was he being himself. We talk about him being this trickster, but he was really wanting to be his brother. Why was he wanting to be his brother? Why was he wanting to be Esau? Because Esau had one thing that Jacob did not have. He had the love of his father. See, this is starting to make sense a little bit in our minds. He loved Esau because Esau was the hunter. He loved the wild game. He wanted to be the bad boy. He wanted his father's love. And this, we see this throughout history. People love the bad boy. Rabbi Sachs says all that changed in the great wrestling match between Jacob and God. He calls him an unknown stranger here. That was when he was told that his name would now be Israel. The stated explanation of this name is, "For you have wrestled with God and with man and have prevailed." It also resonates with two other senses. The Sar, remember I talked about the prince, royalty, and Yashar, which means upright. Both of these are in sharp contrast with the name Jacob, one who holds on to his brother's heel. He's changing his name because he wants him to be a prince, to live up to royalty, to be different. This wasn't this wasn't a request, or this was not a statement, but it was a request. It was a challenge. It was an invitation. Be Israel. Be a prince. Be royalty. Stop wanting to be someone else, to be your brother. Start being what you were called to be. Let your name no longer be Jacob, but Israel, meaning act in such a way that is what people will call you. Be a prince. Be royalty. Be upright. Be yourself. Don't long to be someone else. And Rabbi Sachs says this would turn out to be a challenge, not just then, but through many times in the Jewish future. Oftentimes, Jews have been content to just stay and be themselves, not to be bothered by anybody else. But we can see that as in civilization happens, and things happen later on, next thing you know, here come the Greeks. And they wanted to be like the Greeks. Hellenization came in. They wanted to assimilate. It did nothing but cause problems. Ezekiel talks about it. Here it happened before the Greeks came along. It talks about it, what happened with Babylon. And Ezekiel says, "You say we want to be like the nations, like the peoples of the world who serve wood and stone. But what you have in mind will never happen." Ezekiel 20 and 32. So in Babylon, the people encountered an impressive empire. They were successful economically. These people they wowed them, and they wanted to be like them. Some people, even at that time, they wanted to stop being Jews. They wanted to be someone else. They wanted to be anyone else. When you're in exile, when you're in captivity, that's a big temptation. It's a big temptation. And again, like I said, with the Greeks, the Hellenization, you had people that, like Jason and Melanus, the people that were, wow, look at these people, we can aspire to be something like, that brings us to the story of Hanukkah. I have a book here. in case anybody was wondering. You can get this through Art Scroll. It's a Hanukkah book, and it's coming up Thursday. And so check the dates on that. I'm hearing that. Right. It starts Thursday evening. Right. It starts Friday, but starts the evening and the morning were the first day. Right. Thank you for that. So the battle, the story again, this is Hanukkah, happening in the days of Rome. Why was that battle happening? Because of Hellenization. People were coming in and they were, trying to do away with Torah, do away with the Jewish people. That's one thing, you have so much going on with Hamas. I realize I've gone over my time, but I have to talk about these things. All right. We have the problem with Hamas, and, you have these pro-Palestinian people, saying that Israel is doing genocide. It's actually quite the opposite. It's grown from 1960s or whatever it is up until now, to 300,000 people to over 2 million people. How could that be genocide if they're actually growing? All right. So, but what we have here is we have this fight that's going on. It's the Jewish people that people have been trying to do away with. This small minority of people that have been they're trying to kill the Jewish people off for thousands and thousands of years. Josephus talks about this. He was a defender of Judaism. Then there was the days of enlightenment, and in the European culture, all of this was appealing. The days of Mozart and Beethoven, and you had great rabbis like Rabbi Samson Raphael Hirsch and Nehemiah Nobel, Nobel Prize. All right. So but there was so many that fell into the culture, so many that assimilated, that they had their challenges. They, leading up into the time before the Holocaust, people were hiding their names, hiding their Jewish identity, changing who they were, and you know what? And a lot of times that didn't help. It didn't save them. Rabbi Sachs says, it is happening today in large swaths of the Jewish world. Jews have overachieved. Judaism, with some notable exceptions, has underachieved. There are Jews at or near the top of almost every field of human endeavor today, but all too many have either abandoned their religious heritage or are indifferent to it. For them, being Jewish is a slender ethnicity, too thin to be transmitted to the future, too hollow to inspire. Letting it slip away. Come back to who we are. Your name shall be Israel. Rabbi Sachs says, we have waited so long for what we have today and have never had simultaneously before in all of Jewish history. We have independence and sovereignty in the state of Israel, freedom and equality in the diaspora. Almost everything that 100 generations of our ancestors prayed for has been given to us. Will we really throw away our shot? Will we be Israel? Your Israel shall be your name. Or will we show, as Rabbi Sachs continues, or will we show to our shame that we have not yet outlived the name of Jacob, the person who wanted to be someone else? This is a call. Up. We missed a lot of the idolatry part. Remember, I said on their journey to Bethel, Jacob, he says, get rid of your deities, throw away those idols, and everybody brings the idols and he buries them. All right, you should have destroyed them. That was a mistake. The sages will tell you later on, one of those idols ends up becoming something that they worship, and many are drawn to. So you can see that the mistakes happen here and there. But again, Jacob is that fearful one. There's so much more that we're not even touching on this. And I wish we could do so much more. I'm sorry that I went over so much more in time. But we're fighting against idolatry. We're fighting against not being who we are supposed to be. We have to be ourselves. And it's important that we do that. We have to go. May the Lord bless you and keep you, guard you. As you guard the Torah, he will guard you. May the Lord shine his countenance upon you and be gracious unto you. May his countenance toward you and grant, may his countenance go toward you and grant you peace. Tokemune am segula bowie kala Tokemune am segula bowie kala.